From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
It seems to me, first of all, from what I understand from doctors, that's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
Today, Todd Akin. Will he drop out of Missouri's Senate race? We'll speak with Michelle Goldberg. But are his views that different from Republican vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan? Michelle Goldberg is with Newsweek and The Daily Beast. Last year, Akin and Ryan co-sponsored the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act that attempted to redefine rape.
Rape is rape. And the idea that we should be parsing and qualifying and slicing what types of rape we're talking about doesn't make sense to the American people, and certainly doesn't make sense to me.
Then the invisible wounds of war coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. Marguerite Guzman-Bouvard on the record number of soldiers committing suicide.
This issue, suicides, is perhaps the most frustrating challenge that I've come across since becoming Secretary of Defense last year.
We'll go to South Africa, where police shot dead 34 striking mine workers at a mine owned by Lonmin, the world's third largest platinum producer.
The history that I read about Sharpeville massacre was a history. I never thought that in 2012 we will experience the same massacre under the democratic elected government by ourselves.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Republican Congressmember Todd Akin's vowing to remain in Missouri's Senate race despite widespread calls from within his own party to drop out. Akin sparked a national controversy over the weekend after he told an interviewer that women are somehow capable of blocking an unwanted pregnancy during what he called a, quote, legitimate rape. On Monday, Republican presidential hopeful Mitt Romney joined top Republican leaders in denouncing Akin's comments and asking him to bow out of the race. The National Republican Senatorial Committee also declared it would withdraw support for Akin, as did the Republican advocacy group Crossroads GPS. Today is the deadline for Missouri Senate hopefuls to withdraw from contention, meaning Republicans could field a different candidate if Akin complies with their demands. But instead, Akin's vowed to remain in the race and Monday launched a fundraising drive to support his embattled campaign. We'll have more on this story after headlines. President Obama and Republican rival Mitt Romney continue to trade barbs on tax issues, namely Romney's refusal to release his returns and Obama's contention that Romney's tax policies would burden the middle class. At a town hall event in New Hampshire, Romney accused Obama of falsely claiming the Republican tax plan favors the wealthy.
It seems that the first victim of an Obama campaign is the truth. And it has been sad and disappointing. Frankly, you know, when I became the presumptive nominee, the president called me and congratulated me on becoming the presumptive nominee and said that America deserves an honest debate about the future course of the country, and I agreed. I'm waiting to hear him begin that because all we've heard so far is one attack after the other. And frankly, they're typically not honest.
Speaking to reporters at the White House, President Obama, meanwhile, defended his repeated calls for Romney to release his tax returns.
The American people have assumed that if you want to be president of the United States, that your life's an open book. When it comes to things like your finances, you know, I'm not asking to disclose every detail of, his medical records, although we normally do that as well. I mean, this isn't sort of overly personal here, guys. This is pretty standard stuff. I don't think we're being mean by asking you to do what every other presidential candidate's done. right?
Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa has warned Britain risks diplomatic suicide should it decide to raid Ecuador's London embassy to nab WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. On Monday, Correa said any violation of Ecuador's diplomatic rights would undermine the status of British consular offices worldwide.
It would be suicide for the United Kingdom to enter the Ecuadorian embassy. It would set a precedent that would allow, later on, for the UK's diplomatic premises in other territories to be violated in every corner of the planet. It would be quite terrible, a disastrous precedent.
Britain has threatened to enter the embassy to seize Assange following Ecuador's approval of Assange's bid for political asylum. On Monday, a group of demonstrators marched in Ecuador to support their government's decision.
His life is practically at risk, and our country, Ecuador, is one of the countries that most respects human rights. We are backing this decision and welcoming Julian Assange to our country.
Assange is fighting extradition to Sweden to face questioning on allegations of sex crimes. He and his supporters say he's ultimately seeking to avoid being handed over to the United States to face punishment for publishing leaked U.S. government documents. On Monday, State Department spokesperson Victoria Nuland rejected Assange's concerns.
Well, let me start with the fact that he is making all kinds of wild assertions about us when, in fact, his issue with the government of the United Kingdom has to do with whether he's going to go face justice in Sweden for something that has nothing to do with WikiLeaks. It has to do with charges of sexual misconduct. So he is clearly trying to deflect attention away from the real issue, which is whether he's going to face justice in Sweden, which is the immediate issue. So that case has nothing to do with us. It's a matter between the UK, Sweden, and now Ecuador has inserted itself.
President Obama has warned Syria of U.S. military action should the regime of Bashar al-Assad use chemical weapons. Speaking at the White House Monday, Obama said any chemical warfare by Syria would be his red line.
We have put together a range of contingency plans. We have communicated in no uncertain terms with every player in the region that that's a red line for us, and that there would be enormous consequences if we start seeing movement on the chemical weapons front or the use of chemical weapons. That would change my calculations significantly.
In other Syria news, a Japanese reporter covering the country's civil war has been killed in the Syrian city of Aleppo. Mika Yamamoto was embedded with the opposition Free Syrian Army when she was caught in the middle of a gun battle Monday. Yamamoto was the fourth foreign journalist to die in Syria since March 2011. Ethiopian Prime Minister Meles Zenawi has died of an undisclosed illness while seeking medical treatment abroad. The 57-year-old Ethiopian leader was a key U.S. government ally in Africa who'd been criticized for his record on human rights and accused of killing opponents and rigging elections. Meles's deputy prime minister will be sworn in to replace him. At least 20 people have been killed in a gun battle between prisoners in a Venezuelan jail. It's unclear how the violence began or how the prisoners were able to obtain weapons. The killings mark the latest incident in a spate of prison riots inside Venezuela. In a mixed ruling, a federal appeals court has struck down key parts of two tough immigration laws in Alabama and Georgia, but upheld other controversial sections, including so-called show-me-your-papers provisions. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals struck down a provision of Alabama's law requiring public schools to check the immigration status of students who enroll and block the state's requirement that immigrants carry a registration document at all times. Judges also said the law's opponents were likely to succeed in challenging provisions in both states that would make it a crime under certain circumstances to knowingly transport or harbor undocumented people. But the court ruled Alabama police could continue demanding immigration documents during stops from those they suspect of being in the country illegally and pave the way for Georgia to begin enforcing a similar show-me-your-papers provision. The court decisions follow a similar mixed ruling by the Supreme Court in June that overturned some parts of Arizona's anti-immigrant law, SB 1070, but upheld the show-me-your-papers provision, which critics say legalize racial profiling. The third of 8 U.S. soldiers court-martialed in the death of Army Private Danny Chen has been demoted to sergeant and sentenced to 3 months confinement, with credit for 90 days already served. The 19-year-old Chinese-American Chen allegedly took his own life just weeks after he was deployed to Afghanistan last October. His family says Chen had been abused by comrades on an almost daily basis, including racist hazing, with soldiers throwing rocks at him, calling him ethnic slurs, and forcing him to do push-ups or hang upside down with his mouth full of water. On Friday, Staff Sergeant Blaine Dugas was found guilty of dereliction of duty for failing to prevent Chen's hazing and making false statements to investigators. In response to Dugas's punishment of a demotion and confinement, Elizabeth Ouyang, president of the civil rights group OCA New York, said, quote, "The military justice system cannot deliver justice. Dugas' failure to ensure the physical well-being of Private Chen cost Danny his life." A Republican Congress member has apologized to his constituents after a report emerged saying he'd gone skinny dipping in the Sea of Galilee during a fact-finding trip to Israel last year. Several Republican members of Congress reportedly took a late-night swim in the sea, some reportedly motivated by religious fervor. But Congress member Kevin Yoder of Kansas apparently went a step further by jumping into the sea naked. The late-night incident, which also involved alcohol, drew a strong rebuke at the time from House Majority Leader Eric Cantor and reportedly prompted the FBI to investigate inappropriate behavior. More than 80 members of Congress were on the trip, which was sponsored by a charity affiliated with the pro-Israeli government lobbying group AIPAC, or the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And newly disclosed records from the FBI claim a longtime civil rights activist who died in 2009 served as a government informant. According to the Center for Investigative Reporting, Richard Aoki covertly filed intelligence reports on his fellow activists in the Bay Area after first being recruited by an FBI agent in the 1950s. Aoki was an early member of the Black Panther Party, later served as a field marshal for the group. He helped train Panther members in handling firearms before the group's infamous shootouts with Oakland police in the 1960s. Aoki went on to become an educator, working for 25 years at a community college before his suicide in 2009. 2 years before his death, Aoki had denied being an informant when asked in an interview. A number of his fellow activists have also cast doubt on the claims, but intelligence records released by the FBI list Aoki as an informant dating back to 1967. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report.